Okay, well, I think it's about time for us to get started. I'm only going to take a couple of minutes. My name is Susan Gantner. Actually, it says John Paris on my
You look damn good for a
picture
John
there, it
Paris.
looks
I
like.
gotta say that.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know how that happened. Sorry about that. Anyway, I'm not John, I promise. I'm just going to take a couple of minutes to kick this off. Many of you have been to these lunch and learns before, but I'll do a quick reminder of a couple of things. First of all, there's the format of what we're doing. There's a few analogies, different analogies that we've used, all typically related to food somehow. But basically, I'm going to use the analogy of a three-course meal. So today we're going to have the appetizer and dessert brought to us by Mike Pavlak talking about stored procedures. And then we're going to hear from Rob Swanson and Richard Milone from CNX, who will talk about Valence and all the cool things I can do with that. We use Valence ourselves. I don't think we could put one of these things on. At least it'd be a lot harder without our Valence apps that we use all the time. So I'm looking forward to hearing about their new AI stuff. I'm also looking forward to introducing to you one of our newest business partners. Mike Pavlak has been a friend of ours forever, it seems like, and that's a good thing. And now we have welcomed him in as a business partner, a system developer, so he's going to be hanging around and helping us out with events like this for the foreseeable future. At least that's the plan. One more thing I want to point out about the difference between chat and Q&A. So there's a chat session that a lot of you are using right now to chat to each other and say hello, and also for things like, how do I get the handout? Something's not working. I can't hear anything. Mike's not sharing his charts, something like that. Those kind of things can go in the chat. If you want to talk content, what the presenters are actually talking about, if you want to talk about store procedures or Valence, have a question about that, that should go into Q&A because that's where those people are going to be looking to answer those questions. So that's the difference there. And without any further ado, I don't want to take any more time away from the appetizer, which will be followed by the main course, and Mike will come back for dessert. So take it away, Mike.
You know what? Life's too short. We should start with dessert, but we can't do that. We have to kind of move in a certain direction here. All right. Thank you, Susan, and thank you for the opportunity to share my content here on stored procedures. It's a fun topic that in the world of open source, a lot of people are interested in this sort of thing because, after all, the I in IDMI stands for integrated, right? So one of the things I'm going to talk about is why you want to use stored procedures. But before we get done with we get started all that, the standard public service announcement, make sure you update your ACS like voting in Chicago early and often, right? It comes out at least twice a year. Maybe there's patches and fixes and stuff like that. I know John and Susan are big fans. I'm sure everybody in this audience is doing it, so I probably don't need to spend a lot of time on this slide, but I do like to encourage folks to get current with your ACS because that's going to be pretty important as one of the ingredients we're going to use for these exercises here. So we're talking about leveraging SQL to create and persist business logic, right? That's the concept here. Now you can use 100% pure SQL, or we could do things with RPG and that kind of stuff. We'll cover all those bases in today's discussion. But we're going to focus primarily on procedures, stored procedures, even though there's functions and triggers. We might sneak one function in there as well. But fundamentally, that's what we're going to do is kind of get some of our business logic closer to the database. Now, what are DB2 stored procedures? There's a clinical definition and all that stuff. What I like is it's just another object that you can use to contain business logic and kind of provide that gateway. IBM's doing a great job in adding things like IWS, and there's the toolkit and all kinds of ways to get to RPG business logic. But stored procedures at the end of the day becomes kind of almost a bulletproof way to do that kind of stuff, and to wrap an RPG COBOL sub procedure kind of thing in a DB2 artifact, and then all I need is a database connection to get to data or business logic. Really simplifies the operating model, the development model tremendously. So that's one of the reasons I'm kind of an advocate for those sort of things. Now, another reason why we want to get stuff closer to the database, right? You've probably seen out there this thing called AI. Well, AI wouldn't have gotten to where it is today if it wasn't for the fact that there was so much data being collected out there. And data, as Clive humbly likes to say, data is the new oil. right? So there's a reason why your Google is free, right? Because they're monitoring all kinds of stuff and using that data to do all kinds of amazing things, good, bad, or indifferent, as we like to say. Um, so accessing that data is a challenge sometimes, and accessing data, just accessing rows and columns, we can do that with SQL, no problem. But what happens when I need that data somewhat transformed? I need a real time price. I need current inventory, and that kind of stuff. Might require some business logic to calculate as opposed to just grabbing it out of a database table. So being able to leverage that is a huge thing. And another reason why database is so cool, and I got this from Ryan Moeller at IBM. Yes, this was on one of his slides, so I literally borrowed it from him. The query optimizer, right, is built into the kernel of the operating system. And we always heard about the DB2 is integrated with the operating system at the kernel level, right? So from a performance standpoint, we're talking about leveraging features that are very, very, very low level. So our performance can really shoot up. Obviously, from a performance standpoint, your mileage may vary, and how well you tune things is important as well. I can write crappy code in 12 languages, right? But when you want to optimize it, that's when things get a little interesting, right? So there you go. Now, for the examples that I'm going to cover in today's presentation, I'm going to use the sample data that comes from IBMI. I apologize if this is a little bit small, but when you get the handouts, you can make it bigger. But basically, it's a simple SQL statement to create an SQL sample that's built into the IBMI. And in my case, I'm going to create it in a library called SP sample. I'm not a very original thinker and that kind of stuff. And that's going to create a couple of tables with some sales history, data, some order information, that kind of stuff, just enough to be dangerous. I think it's a really good example because it's not a purist kind of a database environment, but it gives us something to work with. And so that works really well. Now, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with an SQL stored procedure, and then we'll move into some more RPG based integration kind of stuff here, because I think both of them can work here, and both of them can be very salient in your business day to day. We'll start with a very simple SQL statement, where we're selecting a couple of columns. We're selecting that we're going to do a couple of aggregates. We're going to sum some sales and count some orders from the sales file. But we have to join it to the employee table in order to get some information about which department we're in, right? Because we can't have just a single table. We got to join one or more tables. That's perfectly fine. Now in the example here, that select statement, again, it's pretty straightforward, and you'll see on the right-hand side, and you see what the output looks like. I always, 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 like religion, I always test my SQL statements in the database environment inside of ACS, because if it doesn't work there, it's not going to work anywhere else. So at least I can tie things out and make sure things are going to work just right. But when you look at this slide, when you look at that SQL statement, the good programmers, the good SQL people out there are probably they're zoned in, right? You see something that you just don't like in there, right? And that is what? It's the hard-coded department on the where clause, right? Thou shalt not hard code anything, right? So we're going to want to parameterize that. But again, what we're going to do is we're going to kind of grow and we're going to iterate through this kind of thing, one step at a time. So we'll address that. Again, why stored procedures? Just to kind of put a bow on that before we get into the practical examples. RPG is not the only language in the house in most cases. Could be Java, could be PHP, could be Node, could be Ruby. There's a lot of things going on out there, and there's nothing more entertaining than watching the Microsoft.NET people try and recreate the invoice pricing, and then wonder why it doesn't tie out to the invoices that just printed, right? It's entertaining kind of stuff. So if we can enable that business logic through a stored procedure, boom. We've cemented that. We've leveraged the power of the IBMI to connect with all kinds of technologies, not just and the IBMI becomes transparent. It's just like it's like water. It's just you turn it on, you turn it off, and it's working great. So that's a really cool thing to do. All right, quick agenda of my examples. I got a very ambitious task here, but like Susan said, we've got a couple of things here for the appetizer. Then you're going to come back for the dessert. You're actually going to stay. You're going to stay for the entree, because I'm looking forward to the entree as well. We'll do an SQL stored procedure. We'll get into a little SQL function. We'll talk about a classic RPG program, an RPGLE program, a subprocedure with params, a subprocedure with return, and then kind of explore what life would be like after that. So there should be a nice sample of just about almost any type of approach you're going to use. again, my approach to any programming assignment is a very agile one. I'm not like agile religious. It's just that I always start with something small, especially if I can do a test-driven development sort of thing. Break it, iterate, revise, test, break, iterate, revise. It's just kind of like my model, and it's been working pretty well for me for the last couple of years. So, I'll stick with that here. All right, so let's decompose this guy a little bit. This is what the procedure looks like. Notice the SQL statement. I just literally just dropped that in the middle of the procedure. But what does the procedure look like? Well, line one, and some of you may have seen stuff like this before, but we're kind of getting into some examples here. Create or replace is a great phrasing that we can use where we can name our sub procedure. And notice my sub procedure name is longer than 10 characters. It's perfectly okay to do that kind of stuff. Now, what is my sub procedure, or not sub, what is my procedure going to do? My stored procedure going to do? It's going to return a result set, a single result set. It can return multiple result sets. That's more features out there. It's well documented in the DB2 manual as well. And the language in this particular example is SQL. So we're just doing a pure SQL stored procedure kind of thing here. My begin and end basically are like my scope terminators to say where the procedure begins and ends. And I'm declaring a cursor. So cursor one with a return, and I've got my SQL statement embedded in there, and I open up my cursor. And again, this is why we want to use ACS, because in the green screen, I can create this in the green screen, and I can run it in the green screen, but I can't see the results in the green screen because the output of a stored procedure needs to go to standard out, which the green screen can't figure out. So again, using ACS to test your stored procedures is the way you want to go. You call the stored procedure in this particular example with no parameters because we still have that hard-coded little pesky work department in there. And then we go ahead and we can see the results there, and that looks just fine. So we're in good shape there. Under the covers, what's going on? Nice thing is ACS, I can click on procedures. It's going to show me all my procedures. If I need to look at the SQL, I could look at the SQL. Really nice stuff in the green screen. For those of us who still use the green screen, yes, I'm teasing. You can see the short name. However, my good friend Simon Hutchinson corrected me, and I forgot to include it in this presentation. Shame, bad might. You can add an option to change the short name, the 10 character name, to something more meaningful than sales 00001. Right. So please feel free to check that out. I'm sure it's on Simon's site somewhere because he sent me the link for it and I did not include it. So bad Mikey there. All right. So I mentioned before that one of the reasons we want to do this kind of stuff is because we want to be able to access this from other technologies. In this example, I'll use a Python example where I've got my Python script. And you'll notice I got a very short Python script here. I'm going to import the PyODBC module. And what that does is that enables me to be able to talk to DB2. There's a little more setup for that. You can find some tips for that online or send me a note. And once I have the ODBC connection, the module imported, I'll create my database connection. I'm using DSN equals star local, which is basically going to use the security of the user who calls the Python script. And so if you put it on a nightly job entry, whatever user you have there, whoever calls it will inherit those credentials. I create my cursor, I pass in the call to the stored procedure, and I can execute the SQL. Boom. And we can show what the results look like. And it says here, the sales quantity is 14 and the number of orders is 13. So we're getting our data, from the stored procedure. But what do you notice about this Python script? Right? There's nothing in there that's really useful other than the name of the stored procedure. I don't have to have an embedded SQL statement. I don't have to put all kinds of other stuff in there. It's all pretty much compartmentalized or containerized, so to speak. And all my good stuff is in the stored procedure. So that works really, really well. So the next step after that, we've got that hard-coded work department. We need to get rid of that. Right, so we need to get rid of the hard coding and we need to parameterize that. How we do that is in the parenthesis after the procedure name, we're going to put in our parameter definitions. We have input parameters, output parameters, the whole 9 yards. In this example, we're just doing one input parameter. It's going to be a 3-character varchar, make it super simple. And then the only thing we're going to do down here, by the way, by specifying department_in as the variable name, all I have to do is use that value down here in my where clause. So that's the only change I'm making down here in the actual stored procedures, adding in the the variable and then adding in the department in. And as you can see, if I pass in department A00, I get 14 and 13. If I pass in department E21, I get 141.36. It may seem painful to do this in Database Navigator and then go do it in Python, which I'm about to do on the next slide, but it's a good habit to get into, because at any point in time, you could have a problem. And if you jump too many steps, you don't know where the problem exists. Again, iterative development, big, huge fan of that kind of stuff. Now, in this example here, I'm kind of tweaking things a little bit, and I'm importing PyODBC, but I'm also importing the sys module in Python just to show you how the performance is running on this kind of thing here. And it's one of those things that you could pull up to see if you want to measure things like this, or if you want to, or actually in this case I'm using the sys module to pass a parameter into the Python script, kind of like as you would call an RPG program and pass a parameter. So in this case I'm saying I've got my Python statement, I'm passing in the name of the Python script, and I'm passing in the parameter. And the sysargv is a feature inside Python that allows me to grab that value. Again, you could look this kind of stuff up. It's all fundamental basic Python concepts here. I call my stored procedure with a prepared statement. I use the cursor execute, where I connect up the SQL statement with the actual variable that was passed in on the command line, and boom, we can show that we can actually run a Python script soft coded as well. And now we're just passing that parameter back and forth into DB2 and getting the data that we need. Again, you want to keep that front end veneer as thin as possible, right? Keep your business logic nice and tight with the IDMI. You're in good shape there. Here's where I kind of get into the performance aspect of this sort of thing. We're able to run those kind of examples. This was on this example was pulled on a micro partitioned V7R4 box, which I think had two tenths of a core to it. And I think the performance was somewhere in the area of about 41 milliseconds, right? If that's too slow for you, let me know. We can work on performance improvements and that kind of stuff. So there we go. All right. Now, the agenda for the rest of my part, where we get into the dessert, is going to be, we'll get into the function, we'll get into RPG examples, we'll cover a bunch of RPG examples, and then kind of talk about beyond that. With that said, I want to turn it over to our good friends over here at CNX, who are going to take over, and they're going to present some pretty impressive tooling to help you guys move forward. So I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing and let Rob take over.
All right, thanks, Mike. Let me get myself situated here.
Rob, while you're getting set up there, I'll just mention that I'm Richard Milone. I work with Rob, and while Rob is speaking, I'm going to be monitoring the Q&A very closely. Usually when Rob is speaking and demoing the software, we get a lot of questions, so I'll be working on that. If you ask a really good question, or I get enough of the same kind of questions, I may interrupt Rob as he goes to ask him to go deeper on a certain question.
And I love interruptions. So
he loves interruptions. Okay. All right. Go ahead, Rob.
Okay. Well, so our second course of today is to talk about how Valence works with using some of the concepts that Mike just introduced you to, and then a little bit beyond that. So without further ado, I'm just going to jump right into the demo, and then come back and swing around and kind of describe what I've shown you. The product again is called Valence. It's an IBMI specific framework, and within Valence we have a product called Nitro App Builder, which is our low code or no code AI infused web and mobile development tool exclusively for IBMI. So I'm going to flip over to my web browser and just log into a session here. Make sure this is big enough. Okay, so if you download and install Valence, and I'll show you how you can do that on your systems later, you will see a launch pad like this once you log in, and that's just using my regular IBMI profile on my system. And what I wanted to show real quick is under a Lunch and Learn category we just created, taking Mike's little stored procedure example and just kind of showing you how you could render that in a web browser. So let me get so we've got the department being passed as a parameter to what Mike created. Now, you can't call a stored procedure in a select statement. Everything behind the scenes in Valence is a select SQL statement, but you can wrap it, and Mike might even be covering this later. You can wrap a stored procedure inside a function, and that's what we did here. So I'm passing that department, getting back this data that you saw earlier, and here's another department. This is a little devoid of meat, this data. It's just some quick and dirty, segue from what Mike was just doing, but just to kind of illustrate by example the sort of things you can do with Valence to take any kind of SQL result and pop it into a web browser or a mobile device. So what I'm going to do real quick, just before I jump into an actual development example, is I'm just going to show you the sort of things that are included with Valence. I'm going to just focus on the utilities that come with it. So we have a tool that's integrated with Valence called the Nitro File Editor. I can type any file name and it'll actually show me the contents of that file, and I could actually edit the contents of that. Now, obviously you wouldn't want to deploy this to your users. This is really a development tool, but it's kind of handy to have, and you can create views and rearrange the columns and all that sort of stuff. We have an IFS Explorer that lets you kind of go through and you can find whatever you're looking for on your IFS and bring it up, and I don't know what this would look like, but it's a quick and easy way within your browser to get to the IFS and navigate the route and so forth. I'm going to come back to this. Another kind of demo app we include with Valence is called Nitro App, and this also works in your mobile device, so it's an easy way to go and see what's occupying CPU on your system. This is a test box that doesn't have a whole lot of users, but if it did, you might see this chart kind of trending upward towards 90 or 100%. But you could also call up a user, and someone might call you and say, I forgot my password, and I can go and just say, change this password and fix it. So little things like that. This is just more of a nifty demo app of the sort of tooling that Valence includes. A spool file viewer, if you're still generating spool files within your system, this is kind of handy to be able to see the spool files in and out queue. You can configure that so it only shows the user's own spool files that they generated. You can also integrate this in an application to show a spool file that's been created as a result of pressing a button or calling an RPG program, so forth. You can test your RPG calls if you're doing some web service development, things like that. And then I just showed you this one deployed app. What I want to show now is an example, kind of a kitchen sink of all the different widgets available within Valence that you can quickly use to deploy applications to your users. So this is an example of a grid. I like to kind of refer to this as like a subfile on steroids. You can rearrange columns. You can change the sort sequence. Here's a tree grid where you can kind of drill down into things. A pivot table that lets you drill in on different elements. Again, all behind the scenes is just SQL. So if you know where your data resides, it's really easy to build these kinds of tables. Downloading to Excel is included, and we'll show that in a moment. Charts and graphs, if you want to build dashboards and things, again, if you know where the data resides, this stuff you can whip out literally in under 10 minutes if you know what you're doing. Bar charts, column charts, area chart, line charts, and of course you can have it so you can click on things and drill into the data behind it. Other miscellaneous tools include calendars, form widgets. Now I point out this form widget to emphasize that this is not just a tool for displaying data. You can interact with this. I can select a product from a list and type something in and hit save, and that'll actually store this data or call an RPG program to do something with the data. So it lets you focus on the business logic, and we handle all the rendering and the complicated HTML5 coding through this very easy to use tool called Nitro App Builder. So map widgets, tiles, timelines, URLs, all sorts of things you can do. And just to show an example of some applications using actual data, so you can actually see all this example code in the back end and how it's pulling the data. But you can do things like click on a row and have it bring up the detail behind it, or maybe I want to go to see what all my late orders are, and you can sort. Again, all it is just telling it where to go get the data from. So if you know your database, you're off to the races very quickly. Here's an example of a dashboard application where it's showing sales, and then you can kind of see what's behind each one of those pegs and drill down on it. I can click on one of these things and see the data behind that. So all this is just basically telling telling the tool when the user clicks this button, throw this up on the screen and call this SQL statement or call this RPG program to pull back the data. So it's very, very easy to build things really quickly. So just to illustrate that, let me actually go and build something right now. I'm going to go into Nitro App Builder. Now there's 3 elements to a Nitro app. There's a data source, which is basically the SQL statement. You can also use a wizard to walk yourself through it. Or you can use AI, which I'm going to do in a moment, to actually build the SQL statement for you. Then you have the visualization of that data. So once you've figured out where to pull your data from, you can visualize it in the form of a grid or a form or a chart. And then you assemble those widgets into an app and give that to your users. So it's a 1, 2, 3 process. So let's just walk through that right now, and I'll just kind of demonstrate this concept in action. So I'm going to click on Add Data Source here, and it gives me a clean template where I can start doing select everything from demo CMAST, order by CNAME. Pardon my typing. And there we go, we got a list of data. But what I'd like to demonstrate is the concept of using, I didn't mean to access that entirely, of using AI to do this for me, or help me do this, I should say. We're developers, we like to say it's helping us, not doing the work for us, right? So you'll notice up here at the top, it says, help me create my data source. So this is calling the Valence AI tool. And all you have to do is basically give it some minimal information. And if your database is defined well, and I'll describe that here, then it can actually do a lot of work for you just using the metadata of your column descriptions. So let's say my boss said, I want a list of all our customers and how many orders they have and what the total dollar value is. So maybe I'm new to the company. It's like, well, first step is go and find where are these tables or files located? What are their names? So if I can get that much done, then AI can take it from there. So I'm going to say, okay, hello AI, I want you to take the customer master file. So this is a demo file that we include with Valence called VXCusts. And it's just a basic, run-of-the-mill list of customers by customer number with their basic information. And then I've learned through looking at other code or whatever that the customer order header is called VXCO header, and we can see that information here. So you got your standard kind of customer order header file, and that the detail behind that, the line items, are called VXCO DTL. So there we have our product number and quantity and that sort of information. So just with that basic information, I'm going to see what AI can do for me. I basically don't want to have to do any SQL because I'm feeling very lazy today. So I'm going to tell AI here, I'm going to say, give me a list of customers, include all location details, and show the total order count and total order values, or total order values, I guess, for each. Okay, that's kind of crude. If someone told me that, I would be like having to ask them some follow-up questions. Let's see what AI does with what limited information I gave it. I've given it the customer master, the customer order header, and the customer order detail, and told it to give me this SQL statement. So let's see what it comes up with. It's got the metadata from the files, basically the file column names and the file column descriptions. And using that information, it's constructed something that looks pretty good. I'm looking at it right now, and that looks exactly like what I would have done. So if I paste that into my template here, I can see the preview, and that looks pretty good. That looks like a list of customers. I see the total orders, and I see the total order value. So let's refine that a little bit. I'm going to go back here and go back into the tool and say, okay, let's limit the list to customers in the USA. So that should add a where clause to basically limit me to just the just the US customers, which I could have probably typed myself, but again, I'm feeling super lazy today. I want AI to do all the work for me. So, and we can see right here, it said where country is equal to USA. Okay. So now if I paste that in and go look at the results, I should see only USA countries in there now. Okay. Let's refine this a little bit more. Let's give it something a little more challenging. Let's say, okay, include a calculated column that shows the region for each customer, like Midwest, South, etc. See what it comes up with that. So I could have probably done something a little more thorough and given it another file to join to, but let's just see what it kind of comes up with on its own here. We're trying to give the AI a workout and make it earn its $30 a month or whatever it is that would cost. So what I'm expecting to see then is an additional column added that's going to say maybe a case statement that'll say if it's a certain area, then it's Midwest. Okay, then we got South. So we got Midwest, South, Northwest, Northeast, and West. So let's just try that real quick. So now we got a region. I feel like Northeast is a little too vague. Let's do one more change here. Let's say for the region, make New England separate from East. Let's see what it does there. I could go to Google and figure out what states constitute New England, but let's see if it just does it for me. And then we'll make this our last iteration, and we'll move on to the next step. But I just wanted to illustrate the concept of letting AI do this heavy lifting of SQL. And this is actually a fairly simple. You can give it much more complicated requests. It'll do CTEs with clauses and things like that. So now I see we got a New England category. So, okay, let's run with that. So I've got my data source here with all of my requested columns. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. I'm going to call this, we'll call it the Summit Customers. I don't need the underscore, I'll say Summit Customers. Okay, so now I have a data source called Summit Customers. So now let's give a visual depiction of that data that we just had the AI build for us. So I'm going to say create a widget. I'm going to do a grid. And it brings in all the columns that are in that table or in that SQL statement. So I'll select them all. And once I've selected some columns, it shows me a little bit of what that grid's going to look like. So this is like a subfile, except it's in a web browser. So I'll just do some quick refining here. I'll just say cust number, customer name, address 1. We'll take this off just for sake of simplicity. State, province, we're not including Canada, so there won't be any provinces. Zip code, country. Well, we actually don't need the country, it's all US, so we'll leave that off. Call it the region, total orders, and order value. Okay, so, and we could do all sorts of other things. We could construct these columns and make them the width different and stuff like that. But I'm just going to roll with the defaults for the sake of brevity here. Let's do a couple other things. I'm going to say let the users. This is a real crowd pleaser. When you're trying to wean your users off of the green screens and you give them something like this, sometimes you can throw some little extras in to make it even more palatable for them. So say, look, you can resize your columns, move around, hide them, and it'll customize their look and feel. So the next time they launch this application, it'll remember that they like to see the customer name to the left of the customer, and it'll show it that way. I'm going to say let's use a slimmer UI so we can squeeze more columns together. And I'm going to turn paging to, let's say, 100 per page, or I could turn paging off in this case because there's not that many records. And then most importantly, I'm going to say, give the users the ability to download this to Excel. Call it the Summit Customers, XLSX. So this brings up a little download icon down there so that they can actually take this and go off to the wilderness with their spreadsheets, as users tend to love to do. And there's other things you could download too as well. It could be a PDF, a CSV, XML, and so forth. But the lion's share of downloads are usually Excel. And just to add a little extra flavor to this, I'm going to say, let's give the users the ability to filter on the state. So I'm going to say state. I'm going to let them pick a state. And I happen to know that we have a list of customers in another data source. So I can actually, I'm sorry, a list of states in another data source. So I'll just give them the option to do that in a drop down. I'll show you what that looks like. And let's also give them the ability to filter on a customer name. So they can type any part of the customer's name, and that will show up in the filter. So now we've got a state drop down here, and we've got an ability to type the customer's name. Okay, so I'll just leave it at that for now. We'll come back and refine it a little bit in a moment. So I'm going to call this the Summit Customer List Grid. I guess that's a little redundant. Summit Customer Grid. Okay, so now we've got our data source and we've got our grid. I'm going to just do one last thing real quick. I'm going to say, let's flip over to the apps section here, and let's create, we have our one app that showed Mike's stored procedure in action. Let's create a new app, and we'll just call this the, or which widget do we want to bring in? We want to bring in this one we just created. We'll call this the Summit Customers. And I'll just go ahead and save it without doing anything else right now. So I'm going to save this. Let's give us a nice little home icon there, we'll say. And we're going to put this into the Lunch and Learn category. And you can authorize who's allowed to see it and run it and everything like that. But now if I go back to my Launchpad, I'll see this app we just built is right there ready to launch. And I can say, okay, show me just customers in California, and show me anything that has the word fun. So we got 2 customers with fun. And then I can hit download that to Excel. And let's see, I'll launch that, and now we can see we got that in Excel. So users tend to love being able to do their own, make their own spreadsheets on demand like that. So let me go back, and I'm going to take another AI example here and make this even more interesting using some HTML flair. But I hate HTML. Coding HTML is not fun. I prefer to do SQL. So I'm going to have AI do the HTML editing for me so we can jazz up how this looks. So I'm going to go back into Nitro App Builder. I'm going to call up this grid. And it's possible to format using some built-in custom formatters. So for instance, I could say treat this as money and use it as a US currency. And I could take the order count and maybe change the formatting of that number there if I wanted to. So if we look at this now, we got a renderer that's showing us US dollars for that column. Maybe for the state, I might want to make that more narrow or centered. I'll center that for me. But let's say I want to do something to really kind of draw attention to our better customers and our weaker customers. So I'm going to, instead of using this the standard formatting, I'm going to go here into the custom formatter, and now here is where you can enter JavaScript code to manipulate the HTML, how it would be rendered on the user's screen. I don't want to even have to think about it. I want to go Google and go back and forth and iterate my way to this. I'm just going to let AI do this for me. So I'm going to hit the Help Me button, which again brings up the Valence Assistant prompt. I'm going to say, okay, format the number as US currency. Let's just start with that. I was using a built-in renderer, now I'm doing a custom render, so I got to tell it everything I want. So the first thing it's going to do is add some JavaScript to format that number as a US currency. And there's many ways to skin a cat in JavaScript. We'll see which one it picks. So it's doing a international format, okay? Now I'm gonna say, if the value is over 500,000, make it green. And that's gonna adjust our JavaScript a little bit to something that'll probably do a div or something to make it styled in a different color. Again, this is stuff I could probably figure out if I went back and forth with Google and looked up some examples and copied, paste, and tweaked and all that, but this will do it in about 30 seconds for me. So, okay, I see it's doing a span. And let's do one more thing. If the value is under, let's see, what's a weak customer? Anything under 100,000 we'll consider a weak customer, so we'll make it red. Sales guys need to go and hound those customers to get more toys sold. Now I could have probably taken that code and just say, oh, I'll just add another if myself. But again, feeling super lazy today. I haven't had lunch yet. I'm gonna just let the AI do everything so I don't have to think. Okay, so that looks good. Let's just paste that into the code and see how it renders. So I'll hit OK. And when this redraws itself, I should see, yeah, we got greens for our heavy hitters and reds for our needs improvement customers. So let's save that and go relaunch it. Oops. Go back here. Let's go relaunch this thing. Now, I'm launching this off of a launch pad, but you could also send a URL, email a link to somebody and they can click it and it would throw them into this, and you can configure the security so they have to log in or not log in. But the idea is basically the same. It's going to go right on your IBMI, and it's pulling in data. And I could say, show me anything that has the word fun in it. And outside of California, we got quite a few other fun-related toy stores, and we can see which ones are doing well and which ones could use a little more sales action. Okay, it's so easy to get deep, and there's so many things I'd love to show, but I got to keep it kind of light for the sake of brevity. But I'm going to do a couple more quick things here, just to kind of give you an idea of other things you can do within this tool. So I'm going to go into I'm going to go back into the Summit Customers app. I'm going to bring in another widget that I've already created. So I'm going to add a widget called Order List Grid. I'm going to say add it as a pop-up. So now I've got this Order List Grid, which basically shows me orders for all the customers. And now I can go up to what's called behaviors, and I'm going to say, okay, whenever, let's add an icon column, and we'll say list orders is the tooltip, and we'll go, let's find a list of some sort. This looks good. So I'm adding this button, and there's a lot of other things I could do with it, but I'm just going to add a simple button. And then I'm going to say, when they click on that button, I want to filter another widget, which is this order list grid, by the customer number. And then I can say orders for the customer. Actually, let's make it the customer name. Save. Okay. So I've just made that quick change. Let's go see how that looks if I reload it. So now I added a little column here. So if I click on this guy that has 63 orders, it'll bring me up a list of all the orders. And I could have put the download thing on there and they could download that to Excel as well. But really easy, as long as you know where the data is and you can create an SQL statement, you can tie all these things together through behaviors. Let me just show one more example of something that's kind of fun, which is doing maps. So if I take this customer, I can create another widget. We'll do a map widget. And the map widget's using the Google Maps API. All I got to do is tell it which columns in my data source represent the address. So I'll just say address 1, city, state, country. That's pretty much all it needs. And then using that information, it can go. It's just going to pick the first record in the data source, and it found Lexington, Kentucky, and it just threw that on there. And maybe I can say, let's see, marker title. I'll say customer name will show on the title, so that'll make it. If you click on it, then it'll show the name of the company. Lots of other things I could do here, of course, but I'll just leave it simple. We'll say Summit Customer Map. Now let's go back into our app, and we'll just bring that in, and just to wrap it all up, we'll add that widget, sub custom map. I'll do that as a pop-up also. And I'm going to go into behaviors and say, okay, let's add another icon column. This one we'll call show location. Find a map. Let's see, that looks good like that. And save it. And then I'll say when the user clicks on it, what I want to do, I want to filter another widget, this map widget, and I link to it based on the customer number that they're on. And I'll say location of this customer. And I know I'm rushing through this just to kind of give you an idea. Obviously, there's a little more to it, but once you've done this a few times, it gets really easy to do it on your own. So if I go now and launch that app, now I've got another little peg there, so I can click on this location, and it shows me where I'm at on the map. So this is somewhere in Alabama. So we've got some customers that do like multiple pegs with routing between them. So it might show the shipping route for a certain thing. And so you can have like a line drawn that shows how the truck's going to drive. If you had GPSs on your trucks, you could actually have little pegs showing them where everyone is on the map. Or if you had boats with GPS, it could show where the transponder is in the ocean. So lots of things you can do with this. Really the limit is as far as your imagination can go. And the whole point of this, bringing it all back full circle, is that we're doing this with minimal time, minimal effort. All we need to do is tell it where the data resides. So just to kind of sum it all up before we go to the Q&A, what's included with the Valence? If you download it, you get the Valence portal, which is the launch pad that you saw. It also works on mobile. An RPG toolkit, which we didn't really cover in this, but there's a host of service program procedures you can bind to your RPG to send data to and from the browser or the mobile app. So your RPG logic is focused on basically business logic, and you don't have to worry about all the complex rendering stuff because this takes care of it for you, which greatly speeds up the time it takes to create an application. The Nitro App Builder, the Nitro iAdmin, the Nitro File Editor, the IFS Explorer, Fusion 5250. I didn't even go into that. Let me just show that real quick. So a lot of us still have green screens and will for some time. So you can integrate the green screens into your Valence app. So I could have, for instance, a button on my app that says, call this inventory inquiry green screen program and pass this product number, and it could put me right into it. In this case, I'm just going into the first screen after login. But you can actually integrate green screen into your Valence apps, and it's a good way to kind of ease your customers from the green screen world that they've been doing for 3 decades and into something that's kind of integrating the two worlds together. Makes it a lot easier for user acceptance for all the changes that are going to come their way when they get these new UI tools. And usually we find that really helps them with the adaptation of the new tools. Okay, so again, Nitro App Builder is the star of the show, and just to kind of summarize again what we just showed. All you have to do as a developer using Nitro App Builder, is create a data source, which is usually an SQL statement. And again, you can let AI do a lot of the heavy lifting for you. You map your visual widget to that, such as a grid or a chart. And in the case of a chart, your select statement would be very simple. It'd be like select X and Y from your source. And then once you have those widgets, you can define an app and throw those in there. So I took 2 grid widgets. One is a pop-up drill down for the first grid, and then I took a map widget and threw that in there. So you can have all those different widgets pulled together. You can have hundreds of widgets in an app if you wanted to. And apps can share widgets that you've defined for other apps. So you can kind of reuse your logic, which is really handy for keeping standardization going. So just to reiterate again what happens within an app, with the behaviors, I can say if someone clicks on something, say a bar on a chart, then that might bring up a grid widget that shows the details behind that bar. I could also say if I click a row on a grid, maybe that brings up the map, which you kind of saw me just do with that icon column on the customer list. I might say if I push a button somewhere on the app, on the grid widget, maybe that could call an RPG program that does something behind the scenes, handles the business logic. That RPG program can pull anything you need from the screen that the user came from, and then do all sorts of business logic, crunch things, and then send back, here's the result. Or now show the user this. So the back end RPG can tell the front end what to show the user next. Just to kind of summarize exactly what we're doing with Valence, why we have Valence. I mean, the problem it's solving is it can take a long time to do these user interfaces, in any kind of conventional way. So this takes a lot of that heavy lifting away. We can focus as an RPG developer on our RPG business logic and let the UI tools, the UI side handled by Valence. Businesses typically need things turned around so much faster these days, and we can't spend months trying to hack our way through an HTML or JavaScript challenge. And truly modern user interfaces require a high skill set. It's rare to find someone that can do the whole thing. I'm really more of a green screen backend SQL guy. I know the database. I know how to whip out SQL and all sorts of things like that. I'm not very good at the front end. I use this, and people think I'm a miracle worker. So it's a lot of fun to use. And it's just really hard to find people these days. So this really helps solve that shortage of talent that we're all kind of subject to. Okay, boy, I was going a mile a minute, probably sound like an auctioneer, but I didn't want to take up too much more time. Just to show you real quick where you can go to download Valence, and then we'll get to your questions. If you go to cnxcorp.com, up in the upper right here, you can see downloads, and you can just go hit download right there. It'll download a executable file to your laptop or your computer, and you can just double click it, and it'll just ask you a few things, and it'll install Valence on your system. And then so what you'd see then, so Valence uses the built-in Apache server from your IBMI. So you'll just see a bunch of Valence jobs that are fired up running in the background. And whenever a user clicks something on the launch pad or takes an action inside an app, it'll call one of these programs and send it off to do a task and then return control back, and the job goes idle waiting for the next user's action. So it's all completely 100% on the IBMI. There's no third-party servers or anything like that. It's all integrated and wholly using IBMI environments. Okay, yeah. So I'll take it over to Richard for any questions that we need to answer that I didn't cover yet.
I've answered a lot of them on, just responding online, but there is one that I wasn't sure of that you can help me with, Rob, and that is, can the spool file viewer display IPDS files? I don't remember if it does or not. Those are files that have like graphics included or barcodes or something. I kind of remember maybe we added some feature for that.
I think it does. Yeah, it'll handle just about anything that's visual that can be visualized in a browser.
Okay. So the answer to that is yes for the person to answer. Gonzalo Sanchez asked
yes,
that.
but verify.
Yeah.
I don't have one to play with, but I'm pretty sure it does.
Well, luckily, I was answering questions while you were doing your demo. Did you show where users can download?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, if anything you want to try on Valence, obviously just load it to your system and you can try it out. There's no cost for getting a trial.
Just to comment on that, give you a non-biased, hopefully, opinion. Your product has the best download and install process of any I have used on IBMI. Period. End of story.
Well, thank you, Richard. That was his pet project, making that thing as user friendly as possible. So.
and since you did actually have a couple of other questions, but they stuck them in the chat, so I've asked them to repeat them in the Q&A because it really doesn't work in the chat.
Okay, yeah, go ahead. While we're still talking, if anyone who has any last minute questions, just go ahead and put them in there. There were a lot of questions on how the AI works, so I'd like to sort of cover that in detail for everyone. There have been plenty of questions on that. So when Rob was asking his questions to the AI, it's calling out to a CNX server running at IBM's data center in Dallas. It takes that request and it adds a lot of extra information to it about Valence and how Valence works and format that it needs to respond in. So the AI understands the context. So it packages up this whole request. Then it sends it to a ChatGPT API service. We get it back from that service at our servers and then send it back to the system. So there's nothing extra that you need to install on your IBM I system or running a separate server. Based on the questions I was getting, it seems like maybe some people were confused that, oh, you have to like install something separate for the AI to work or have something custom, but you don't. If you can install Valence on your system, on your IBM I system, and it has access to the internet to make calls to CNX's server, that's all you need. Okay. Let's see, we got a few more questions here. Yeah, I think we covered. There's a few very specific questions here that I'll just answer. But maybe John, you can help me out just by understanding, like, will people be able to see the answers to all the questions in the Q&A section after the webinar? They can just look up the Q&A.
It's up to you, Richard. You will receive all of the Q&A data.
Mm-hmm.
Zoom do not store it with the recording. The transcript and the chat are stored, but not the Q&A for some reason.
Okay.
So it's up to you if you want to put out the questions and answers or put them on a web page or something for people. That's your choice.
Yeah. Okay. Then I'll take a snapshot of the Q&A just so that everybody gets them afterwards, and we'll send that out to everybody with our other resources.
Yeah.
You may want to do a bit of formatting on it, Richard. The Q&A stuff comes out in a rather odd format, so
Okay.
a little bit of work with the spreadsheet to make it a little bit more readable for people would be useful.
We'll let
Okay.
AI do it.
Yeah, there you go.
Of course. Okay, and then while Mike is speaking again in his next section, I'll answer a few more of the open questions for anybody that's still waiting for an answer.
Okay, very good. Well, with that second course out of the way, we'll turn it back over to Mike for the third round.
All right, time for dessert, folks. Here we go. Let's see. Are you seeing my screen? I hope.
Yeah, yes.
Yes,
Okay,
got it.
perfect. All right, great. And thank you, Rob and Richard. I've been chatting with these guys on and off at different events for years. I just think the world of these guys. And hey, folks, I don't know if you noticed. I can look at my clock over here. Rob built a fully functional application with an SQL statement in like less than 30 minutes time. So obviously there's a little bit of a learning curve, but it ain't much from what I saw there. And that really is all about productivity. We can save that kind of time as developers. That's massive. I love that stuff. All right, back to my agenda talking about stored procedures. So we're going to kind of run down the road of some of these additional values out there. And what I want to do is we'll jump into a classic RPG example. This one I actually borrowed from some code I used at a previous company. I know nobody on this call has any more programs that look like this, but yeah, you might bump into one once in a while, that kind of stuff. So looking at that classic RPG object, if we want to wrap that guy up in a stored procedure, it's actually a little less code looking than we saw in the previous example. So the way the stored procedure would look is we got our create or replace procedure, give it a name. And in this example here, we're basically calling a program that has two input-output parameters, both 10-character alpha. And in this case, we specified language as RPG. Now, make note of that. We're going to talk about that in a second. And then the external name, again, of the program that we're attaching to, we give that the program name, and we're good to go. And the parameter style is basically general. And this gives you have up to 256 parameters to be able to use in this particular model. If that's not enough, and I know there's folks out there who find that it is not enough, stay tuned. We'll address that as we go along here. And but the nice thing is that once I've created that procedure, I don't have to do anything to the program. All I have to do is create the procedure, and the procedure is going to find the program and run it and execute it. And again, from the GUI interface of ACS, I always test things out here, and I pass in a 1 and I got back IBM. I pass in a 2, I got back Zen. I pass in a 3, I got back a wrong code. So the plumbing is working, right? So the idea here is that to wrap an RPG program, or in this case a classic RPG program, just a couple of lines of code. All right, so that knocks out our RPG Classic example. Now let's get into an RPGLE flavor program. In this one here, I'm using a little bit more RPG code. Gonna basically pass in 2 parameters. We're gonna pass back a third parameter in this example here. We're gonna concatenate the 2 strings together and have an output string, and we'll be good to go. Very simple kind of an RPG LE free kind of an example here. And then the parameter interface, or most of the stored procedure in this particular example, looks pretty much the same. Depending on your parameters, if they're in out, we're going to specify the 3 parameters, but we're going to change the language. The language goes from RPG to RPGLE. And what that does is that buys you up to 2,000 parameters. If you need more than 2,000 parameters, please call Scott Forsty, and he will probably arrange a therapy session for you. No, I'm just kidding. The reality is that I hope 2,000 is more than enough. I think IBM hopes that as well. But it's good to know that kind of information because again we have some folks who have a lot of parameter information out there. Maybe you have to parse a few things. Okay, hopefully your mileage will work on that kind of stuff right there. So that'll create that procedure, and once we have that procedure built, again, test your calls. Hi ho. In this case, I say hi ho and hyphens. Yep. Yo yo, and there we go. We got the yo yo, and that sure concatenated things, and the no go, and we can see that example down there as well. And again, just to highlight a couple of things, I really appreciate the fact that with the ACS interface, you could see things very quickly, very cleanly, and you could see your performance right away as well. So if you build a stored procedure that's doing something a little more extravagant, maybe it's doing heavy database IO, or it's doing a multiple column, multiple table join or something like that, keep your eye on that right there. Because if you can identify a performance issue right now, build an index or optimize something before it goes into production, that's hugely valuable. That's why that's there. We want to be able to take advantage of that kind of stuff. So, IBM has invested. I think I had on a previous slide. IBM has invested in every technology refresh ever since they started technology refreshes. There's been enhancements to DB2. So, it's very clear that DB2 is very strategic. RPG is still strategic. I mean, all these other things are strategic, but IBM definitely has got a special love for DB2 clearly, and taking advantage of that is absolutely enormous. All right, now I've got a couple of examples with subprocedures, but I have to confess my sins right now. In fact, let me I can go ahead and turn my camera back on so I can really seem contritious here. Well, maybe I'll do that later. But anyway, the idea here is that I want to talk about. Here we go. When it talks about I used to be a darn good RPG programmer. Keyword in that phrase, used to be, right? And then I got distracted with this open source stuff for many years. So I still know a lot of RPG, but man, has IBM really enhanced RPG nicely, and I love it, and all the stuff that they've added to it. Subprocedures were just kind of catching on as I was kind of moving over to open source and that kind of stuff. But subprocedures are such the way to go, right? So, I mean, building a presentation like this wouldn't be any good if I didn't at least cover, 1 or 2 examples of stored procedures, of sub-procedure, RPG sub-procedures. But again, I'm being very honest here. I'm a little rough with that kind of stuff. So what I did was I knocked on the door of my friend, Charlie Garino. I said, hey, Charlie, you got a couple examples I can steal? He's like, yes, I have exactly what you're looking for. And he gave me some pretty nifty things here. One's sub-procedure is kind of a remove blank sort of things. And another one is a reverse string kind of thing. So I thought that's fantastic. Those perfect examples of what I want to do, kind of showing the plumbing going between the DB2 stored procedure, the RPG program, and back again. And then again, you can use a lot of different tooling on the front end development, whether you're doing JavaScript, Node, Python, Ruby, Java. The idea is we're making that the needs on the front end veneer as thin as possible, and keeping all that good solid business logic tight with the IBMI. Because once you start distributing business logic, things just get chaotic and way out of hand. And I'm sure some of you out there have experienced that kind of a nightmare. I'd love to hear a story or two if you want to feel free to share it in the chat. All right. So, and again, the cool thing about this is that, it's not a lot of change to make this work, which is, just wonderful, in my opinion. So we're gonna we'll specify the parameters that we're doing in this particular example. We've got a couple of 24 chart parameters in this particular example, and we're obviously specifying RPGLE. Now the rest of some of the additional parameters on here I threw in here just as kind of a interesting points to throw out there. I'm not going to get into a whole lot of gory detail on this stuff. We have things like deterministic, which can force the IBMI to make sure that it runs the full procedure every time, or you could actually cache things. And so that's a way to optimize things. So for example, if you've got a sales executive out there who is looking at the dashboard and he's constantly hitting the F5 button on his web page, right? Or maybe he's using the Valence application. He's hitting that F5 button like it's going out of style, and he keeps calling stored procedure every time you hit F5, right? By caching some of that data, you can improve the performance and reduce some of the beating that DB2 might take over something like that. And especially if you got an army of salespeople looking to see when their commissions are being paid out. There's advantages to take advantage of stuff like that that's built into DB2 as well as some of the other mechanisms as well, which is kind of neat. The fenced and not fenced gets into thread safety. So if you have multiple cores on your IDMI, you can take advantage of some of that stuff out there. It's really kind of cool. But you'll notice our external name now here. We've got the name of our service program, and then in parenthesis, we've got the name of the sub procedure. So that's it. That's as easy as that to actually call the sub procedure, on your IDMI and take advantage of things as you move along here. And again, I'm going to show you. We've got the example of the stored procedure, and then we also have the 3 examples of some calls, right? So we're basically gonna call this up, and we're gonna compress some spaces out of this guy here. So I pass in a simple phrase, and boom, we get back. Yep, this is a simple phrase. The quick brown fox, which everybody knows by heart, that compress it out. And for those of us more progressive, I love throwing these things out there for my kids to look at. We throw a little hot to go, and we compress the spaces out of that, and we can see that we got a response back. So again, being able to leverage not only RPG programs, SQL, but sub procedures, which is where your business logic should be, right? That's absolutely enormous and that sort of thing. All right. Now, what about a sub procedure that actually does a return? Well, a sub procedure that does a return is a kind of a funky little beast, right? So instead of passing data back through a parameter interface like we typically see with RPG, we want to do a return. Okay, well, if we do a return, how do we capture that? Well, doing that in a pure sub procedure can be rather challenging, as Rob indicated earlier. So what I'm going to do for that example is I'm going to do exactly what he did. I'm going to wrap it in a function. And this is how we're going to take advantage of the function. And you can call the function a certain way, and you'll see that in just a second, to give us an example of the output. Now, the only thing I'm changing here really is, from procedure, I go from procedure to function, right? So there's that. We identify our parameters coming in, and what we're returning. Language is, of course, RPGLE and that kind of stuff. And here is our sub procedure that we're calling from our service program. It's the reverse string function, and there we go. And that's, again, pretty straightforward. Now, how do we leverage this kind of thing? Well, we're gonna create. We're gonna go ahead and run our example here, and then we can go ahead and we can call. In this particular example, we're going to call our stored procedure, and we'll pass in our values. And and you'll notice that I'm using a select statement now, kind of like what Rob was alluding to earlier. So I'm saying select, instead of just calling the stored procedure, I'm embedding the stored procedure call in as a column in the select. And I'm going to say select spsample.call RPG sub 2, and I pass in hello world, and but I'm also saying from sysIBM .sysdummy1, which is basically a table on your system that has one row in it for this kind of thing. And I can get back, my simple example back in this particular call. Now, if this were a columnar sort of thing you want to do, then you're good to go. And we can see we got hello world backwards. Now, when you're testing this kind of stuff, it's probably a good idea to not use a palindrome in your test, because now I can't tell if the second call was successful or not. Okay, I just figured that'd be kind of fun. And then I Googled to see if there's something clever out there. And if you, and this is a perfect way to segue towards the end here, if you put in nits stressed, it comes back with desserts stink. which nobody at System I Developer believes that. If you understand, if you've ever been to a summit, you know very clearly desserts are the most important thing, which is why we're covering that here in the dessert section of the presentation. So again, you know, the idea here is that we want to be able to leverage what we have and enable it for whatever technology needs to consume it. It could be CNX, it could be, you know, any other technology like PHP or Python or Ruby, for those who are still using Ruby. You know, the question is, you know, where do you go from here? Simon was very kind enough to put in a comment there about how to address the long name issue. So you can do that and address that kind of stuff, or the short name issue. For folks who wanted to have something more meaningful for a short name, you know, your inventory of your stored procedures is available through ACS, and it's probably also, and I didn't look this up, but I gotta believe it's also available through some sort of a SQL Select where we can kind of, you know, pull that up as well. Now, one of the questions that you might have is, well, how do we address library lists? And typically, when you know, for example, like from ACS, you're going to configure the library list in your ACS session. Right? That's cool. But if you're doing this from Python or PHP, you know, when you set up your database connection to DB2, you're typically going to use a library list type connector that's configured through that database connection. So you want to look up, you know, what the rules and parameters are with that. And I've got to believe, I don't remember Rob saying anything about that, but I got to believe it's pretty easy for to do that through CNX as well. I'll let them make a comment on that. If you're having trouble sleeping at night, the DB2 manual for IBM i7.5 is 2,154 pages. For 7.6, they added 2 pages. I don't know how they only added 2 pages with all the new stuff that they have in the database, but God bless. But I don't recommend printing that unless you really want to kill a tree. But I remember way back in the day, I printed the DB2 manual because I wanted to have a copy of it, and it was much smaller. It's obviously it's grown a lot, you know, in the last few years. If you remember Redbooks, there's a Redbook out there on SQL procedures, triggers, and functions that you could use. It covers most of the salient things. Some things certainly have changed and improved and that sort of thing, but the reality is that there's still a lot of good meat in that Redbook. The tragedy is I looked at all the authors of that Redbook, and I think all of them are now retired. But don't worry, the IBM still has more people working on DB2, and there's other IBM consultants out there. Kent Milligan, and it was a good friend of the System I Developer crowd, and some other folks out there are still working with this kind of stuff. So a lot of resources you can draw on for this kind of stuff as well. So what are some of the additional things you might want to consider doing with stored procedures? Well, you can actually have a stored procedure return multiple record sets, multiple result sets. That's one thing. You can get into thread safe applications where if you're using SMP, if you have SMP turned on, this is for the big iron folks out there who have, you know, 6, 10, 20 cores, and you have a massive SQL statement that's going to read over trillions of rows and stuff like that. You know, DB2 will break up that SQL request and distribute it across multiple processors and then give you your result set back. I don't know what kind of dark magic they're doing in Rochester to make that happen, but that's freaking amazing. You know, so, you know, being able to leverage that kind of stuff is pretty nifty out there. There's lots and lots of more integration types out there, which, you know, where you might want to be accessing things, calling things, and calling CL programs, that sort of thing. So there's a lot that you could take advantage of in this technology space. So, you know, I'm just kind of covering the surface of the ice cube, so to speak. You know, feel free to dig in even more on your own. With that said, I will open it up to Q&A. I didn't see too many questions out there earlier. And I see there's some chats out there, which is great. And I don't know what happened to the cat. Oh, there it is. Oh, there he's hiding on me. Here we go. There's Q&A. All right. All right. How would you handle the security for a stored procedure that directly accesses a file? I don't grant my users read access to data files, but use program adoption to control the access. That is a great question, and I don't know the answer off the top of my head, but I have a couple of places where I would go to dig on something like that. First of all, if it's an SQL-based stored procedure only, then you might take a look at the C program that's created by the SQL stored procedure, and then you could probably give that the adopted authority. Now, that's an extra step you'd have to go through every time you revise a stored procedure, but you're doing that with your RPG programs anyway, right? So that is one angle that I would certainly look at. The second angle I would look at is if your stored procedure is calling an RPG program with adopted authority, I think you're done. I think that's pretty much it right there. That's my best recommendation for that one. And John Parrish would like to answer this as well. Great. And you have source code examples available for browsing either in the web or GitHub. You know what? I should share these out on GitHub. I will work on that. But there you go. Okay. Do you know if IBM has any plans to allow for the creation of Oracle-like SQL packages where you can encapsulate multiple sprocs and UDS within the same package? I don't know. That's a great question, though. I know that my sister and my brother-in-law are both Oracle DBAs, so imagine the pillow talk. But the reality is that I know the Oracle DBAs out there. I refer to them as the macho, hairy-chested SQL developers, because they write SQL statements that just make me blush. So I can certainly see why they would need that kind of stuff. I like to think in the IBMI space we're a little bit more, how should I say, a little bit more poignant, we're a little bit more specific when we're building stuff over here. But then again, there's folks out there building like really amazing things with DB2 and SQL and stored procedures out there. So your mileage may vary. All right, looks like we've answered a bunch of these. Have I missed anything? Let's see here. I know we're not supposed to. There's people asking questions in the chat, and they should be using the QA. But there you go. All right. Mike D's gist. I love it, Anton. Yes, absolutely. That's a great idea. I'll definitely do that. All righty. Cool. All right. Well, if there aren't any other questions, I can. I think we can wrap things up here. Susan, do you want to say goodbye, or are we just going to say sayonara to all these wonderful people who tuned in today?
Sure. As soon as I find the mute button. Bye, everybody. Thanks for joining us. It's been a big crowd and a great session. I learned a lot, and you'd think I would have known it all by now, but there you go.
And Buzz says, Pavlak, you still talk too fast. Yes, I apologize. I always try and pack more materially and then I have time for it. I hear you. I'm sure John and Susan were going to wrap me up on the knuckles about that after this call.
Oh, we've given up on you, Mike.
Thank you, folks.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Ciao.
Bye now.